Hello, I'm Charlie Radigan. I'm chair of the board here at WCTV and the executive director at the Vermont Institute of Natural Science. And we're here to have a discussion actually about the proposed new middle and high school. And I'm happy to welcome these two very distinguished and fine gentlemen. So this is Ben Ford. Ben is chair of the new build committee for the school board, and Jim Fenn, who is Director of Finance. Directors of Finance are very close to my heart, actually. So thank you very much for coming, and Ben, thank you for your time.
Good to be here.
So we're going to ask some questions to bring some clarity to this discussion related to the new bond issue that's happening, and the vote is in March, is that right?
That's right, March 5th.
March 5th. Well, Ben, let's start with you. At the simplest level, why is a new school needed?
Sure, and I think it's important to kind of frame the picture with what is our school district composed of first. And it goes well beyond Woodstock these days. We have 7 towns who are members of our school district. We have Reading, Bridgewater, Killington, there's Plymouth, Barnard, Pomfret, and Woodstock. And with all those towns, that gives us a current population at the middle school and high school building of about 450 kids, over 1,000 children in the 6 schools of our school district. But the problem with the school building is that it's old and it's pretty much shot. Some of the problems that we've experienced most recently, just to give you a few examples, we've got gym supports that are cracking. The snow load is not supported, and as a result, we've had to evacuate games mid-game. Septic lines are calcified to the point where we have sewage backing up into the bathrooms, and all the systems. A report that was done by the state last year indicate that we're at a point where we need about $16 million worth of short-term repairs, and that's just from a visual inspection.
But it's my understanding that actually repairing is not necessarily feasible.
No, and the reason for that is another report that from a year before from the Secretary of Education. There was a comprehensive survey that happened statewide, and it ranked our school facility the 2nd worst in the state. They used something called the Facilities Condition Index. That essentially is a measure of how much, how depleted your building is. It's scaled from 1 to 100. Our building is at 96.7 2 years ago. And the state has recently come out with new standards for construction aid. They're in the process of looking very hard at bringing that program back. It's been suspended since 2007, but they've made it clear that no building that has an FCI greater than 65 will be eligible for any state assistance.
So there would be no state money that would be directed towards renovation?
That's correct.
So that leads to the next question, Jim, which I think is renovation feasible or not feasible?
Renovation isn't feasible long term. Short term, we can continue to band-aid the building, but the building, we won't, if state aid comes back, we're not eligible for state aid. And the building's useful life is mostly over, and renovating it may extend it a few years, but it doesn't give us a 30 or 40-year building. It gives us a 5 or 10-year building.
And there's still cost implications of that, and fairly substantial cost implications.
Fairly substantial cost implications. As Ben said, about $16 million, very short term cost to repair it. It still does not meet ADA or fire compliance or many of these other national standards for safety. And one of the issues with renovating is if we do a major renovation, we have to bring the building in compliance with fire rating, ADA, and all those, and we may not be able to with this building.
Right. So essentially, that money would be sort of ill-spent. It would not really make sense for us to do that.
Yeah, good money after bad, really, is that scenario.
Mm-hmm. So you have been working on this for, I know, a long time. And you've done a tremendous amount of research and work, and you've come up with a plan and a design Why don't you talk about that, if you would?
Yeah, the new building is pretty exciting. The work actually goes back before my time on the board, about 8 years, when we first started looking at answers to the problems that we're beginning to experience with the facility. In 2017, we brought in an architect, LaValle Brenzinger Architects. The lead architect is Lee Sherwood. He's been wonderful to work with. They're known for building very efficient, economical school buildings. And one of the priorities that we've had from the outset is to achieve net zero with this building, just as we've done with Union Arena across the parking lot. And that's something that's, we have a completed design. We're at the detailed design phase. And the new building will be all electric. It'll be a mix of geothermal and heat pumps with solar panels on the roof of the facility. New spaces for modern teaching and learning. Very different approaches to how kids are taught these days, particularly in some of the areas that our district really excels at. And people don't talk a lot about it, but special education is an area where our district is a leader in the state. Special education is very different in 2023 than it was in 1958 when that building was built. You need a lot of one-on-one time. You need time in closed spaces. We recognize that. But all across the curriculum, very different kind of building.
So schools are, by nature, complex buildings.
That's right.
There's many facets to the school. But the bottom line is it creates a learning environment that's conducive, really, to growth in students. Maybe talk about the number of students currently that we serve, what we're preparing for.
Yeah, as part of our applications to the state for approval for this project, we look at our current enrollment, and then we're required to do an enrollment study. There's an entity out of Massachusetts called the New England School Development Council, and they're kind of the source of truth for predicting what your enrollment's going to do. One of the interesting things that we found, our current school population, as I said, is around 450 students. But what NESDAQ is predicting for us is a gain by 2030 of 120 students. And that's a mix of various factors. A lot of things having to do with remote work. That's a big change. I think we can all look around our neighborhoods and see a lot of new faces and young families.
Yeah.
And some of the other things that we see that are kind of our early indications that forecast is accurate are the number of young students that we've got in the system, and also students, kids in daycares. We've got 2 new daycares, one in Bridgewater. The Bridgewater School opened back up. There's the Mill School has opened up in the east end of Woodstock. They all have waiting lists, and we've got a wait list on our pre-Ks of 60 kids.
So what I've noticed anecdotally, of course, is an influx of new families with young children. And they're here for the quality of life. They may have been raised here and have come back. And they're looking to make this community their home. So how important is this new school for keeping those people active and in the community?
I think it's absolutely vital. I've got 2 young kids, one in 1st grade, another in 3rd grade. Both are at Woodstock Elementary School. And among our peer groups, that's something that's front and center of all of our discussions, certainly these days. But it's a choice that parents, unfortunately, in recent years have had to make as kids get to that, to the 7th grade, to say, do I, in particular in high school, actually, it's more of a 9th grade decision that parents are saying, is this, do I feel comfortable having my kid in this building, or are there other options that we need to explore? And more, unfortunately, we're seeing parents, take other options in the area.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about the cost and its comparison to other projects. So I think from what I've been able to determine, the costs here to build are very reasonable.
They are. We've gone through recently a costing exercise where we're working with our construction manager, and they did a cost projection for this project. And then we went through a process called value engineering. And so their cost projection came in higher than the number that we're at right now. And through a series of meetings, we went through and reviewed what they proposed, made some changes. We actually removed about 5,000 square feet from the building to bring it down to the $99 million that it is now. And so we carefully looked at the programs we were trying to offer, and the size of the building. And right now, the building is designed to continue offering all the programs that we're offering. The usage for each classroom is about 80% of the time. So we won't have classrooms sitting idle all day. Every classroom will be scheduled about 80% of the time. The state has recently reviewed construction costs. We're looking at an all-in construction cost. By all-in, I mean that includes furniture and all of what's called soft costs of $627 a square foot. The Burlington project that we've all been watching on the news is a little over $800 a square foot. And the state has now said around $655 a square foot is a reasonable price just for the construction, just for the building, not all the soft costs. So we're building what I would call a Chevrolet. It's a mid-range. It's not the most luxurious, but it certainly is not a shack. It's a mid-range building to meet the needs of our communities and the expectations for learning that we have, and to meet the needs of Vermont weather and Vermont environment.
Sure. So, from what I've been able to understand is that there's a need, it's an identifiable need. Renovation is not an option and not a real option. The cost to build, people have been very conscious of what that is and have been able to negotiate what seems to be a remarkably reasonable price, and that gives you all in for the school. So people, of course, are, when you say $100 million or $99 million, people go, well, that's a lot of money, which of course it is. But compared to other places, somebody in Massachusetts building something similar to this, it would still be $100 million.
Oh, certainly.
Yeah, or more.
Yeah, looking around, the New England region, and Massachusetts is a little bit different situation in that they've got a sales tax that they impose that kind of subsidizes their buildings, and they tend to be a little bit more elaborate. But certainly around the New England region, as Jim indicated, when the state set its per foot pricing standards in December for bringing back the construction aid program, our planned building is cheaper than all the other comparative schools that they looked at on a square foot basis.
Yeah. Well, so it goes to the elephant in the room, which of course is its impact on the tax base and on individual taxpayers. Could you guys talk about, who wants to start with that?
Yeah, I can start. I think one thing to keep in mind is that Vermont is a pretty complicated place in terms of figuring out how taxes work on your ed tax bill. But the first place to start is that it's a property tax, that only homestead taxpayers residing in the district will be impacted by the tax, and that means that anybody who's renting a property is not going to be subject to any impact to the taxes. The other aspect of it is that Vermont has an income sensitivity program that 2/3 of homeowners get some degree of credit off their tax bill based on having an income that is qualified for the program, and that starts at $128,000 a year. So anybody with an income less than that can qualify up to $5,600 worth of credit off their tax bill, and people who make $47,000 a year or less get an additional $2,400 off of their municipal tax bill. So that's a pretty great program that we have in Vermont, and it indicates kind of the affordability of the project, particularly for people on some of the lower end of the socioeconomic spectrum.
Some of the other efforts, though, that a team of people here in our area have done is we're doing some private fundraising. And the private fundraising has already raised commitments of over $3 million, over $3.5 million actually, towards this project. And part of our goal with this fundraising is to help soften the impact in the early years of a bond. So because a bond starts with its highest payment in the first year and it gradually goes down over the life of the bond. And so the fundraising, the intent is to make sure that we build the energy efficient solar and all those things, but also to help soften that impact as we go forward.
A couple other aspects of the school board's plan for making the project affordable for taxpayers. First, and I think the most important thing, is that this is something that was one of your ideas, Jim, was that under Vermont law, municipal bonds don't need to be repaid for up to 5 years. And as a result, we can offer taxpayers a grace period. In this case, it'll be 3 years. We'll take, so if the bond passes in March, we're looking at late 2027 before when those tax bills go out, before anybody would see any impact. And that gives people time. And I think that's an important factor, particularly with the current state of taxes in Vermont.
So is there a place that people can go to actually see what the impact might be to them as individual taxpayers?
Yes, there is. If on our website, the school district website is mountainviews.org, mtviews.org, and you go to scroll down to the Breaking New Ground. That's the project aspect of the website, and within that you can scroll down to Understanding the Tax Impact, and there's an online calculator. You can download that with the click of a button, put in your home value, your income level, and it'll tell you what the impact of the bond will be on the 30-year projection.
So I think, of course, this is an emotional issue because it has to do with money. But I think that, from my perspective, that this project seems to be an essential project for the vitality and health of this community long term. Do you agree with that, or what do you think?
Absolutely, Charlie. It couldn't. I don't think there's anything that could be more important to this community right now, given the recent influx that we've had of families and just how much people are looking at this project and kind of making big decisions based on it. But what it really comes down to is, given the fact that we're looking at replacing this facility, it's really a yes or no question, and it's on the ballot in March. It's, do we want to continue having a high school in this community, a middle school and high school building? And the answer to that, I believe everyone should believe, is yes. It serves as a centerpiece of so much community activity, a draw for so many young families to our area. And I guess I have a hard time imagining what Woodstock would be like if we didn't have a high school.
And the danger would be that the high school that currently exists will no longer be viable in 3 to 5 years anyway.
Yeah, our buildings and grounds crew does an amazing job of keeping the place online, but they can only do so much.
Yeah. So if people want to learn more, where would they go to that?
Sure, yeah, that same website, mtviews.org, Breaking New Ground, and there's an FAQ section there. People can also contact the school district. My email is ben.ford@mtviews.org, and happy to take questions there. There's also an email mailbox online that people can submit questions to.
Good, and we'll put this on the screen so people can actually see it.
Sounds good.
Yeah. So thank you both. Anything in summary that you'd like to say, or?
No, I hope we get a big turnout at the polls, and thanking everybody for their time and attention.
Good. Thanks for tuning in, and look for more information on the website, and send Ben a note if you've got questions.